Okay, and I mean, there's quite a lot of questions about what you said about Brexit, and if I could just sort of start off on...
Oh, you surprised me. Yes.
I mean, I don't think anything you said was inconsistent with the belief that Brexit might lead to short to medium term economic damage. That's to say you didn't address that question. And so I suppose the first one is, do you accept the fact that leaving the single market in the customs union is going to have negative economic consequences for the UK?
In the short term, absolutely. But what I would really like to say about this is that I think for many in the debate about leaving the EU, both on the leave side and on the remain side, there was a sense that once we'd decided to leave, that would be it. Everything would be changed. We'd be in a new world straight away. And the reality for many who decided, I'd rather leave, but I'm going to vote remain, it was because they had the foresight to see this is going to be a journey. It could take some time to create that separation in a way that works for all of us. And therefore, I don't want to go through that upheaval. So it wasn't that it was an overnight flipping of a switch. It was always going to be a journey. And of course, when you change things overnight, there are short-term changes that are, in fact, where economic changes are concerned, immediately damaging. In other areas, immediately beneficial. But the journey that we've been on, what I was trying to say today is that 7 years on, I do believe we've turned a corner. And the reason I gave the example of the Parliamentary Partnership Assembly is because, actually, just to expand on that slightly, at the first meeting we had, which was just over a year ago, there was a real sense from Maros Sefcovic of, well, you made this decision, you suck it up, you know, whatever happens, it's your fault. That was the real subtext. But then when we re-met in the UK in December, from Maros Sefcovic to Nathalie Loiseau, who co-chairs it with the UK side, to all of the MEPs in the room, everybody was talking a new language of collaboration, cooperation, let's make this work, we need to move forward together. So it's a journey. Yes, there have been short-term hits, and I absolutely accept that, but it was always going to be a journey.
But isn't there a bit of a problem? I mean, you were talking about trust before and popular trust. No one in that campaign said, if you vote for it to leave, there will be... You know, the bus didn't say, vote leave, ban foie gras. It said, vote leave and we will become better off, or we will pay more for the NHS. And isn't there a problem there in the sense that actually no one said, this is going to be hard? And I get it, it's a political campaign, but do you see why even some Leave voters now are feeling disillusioned because they feel this isn't what we were promised?
Again, this is very problematic, and I know I'm going to annoy Remainers in the audience.
Annoy away.
Yeah, thank you. I'm free speech and all that. Let's annoy you. So when you're in a referendum, it's not like a general election, okay? When you have a general election, you set out a manifesto, and it might surprise you to know the government of the day then tries very hard to fulfill its manifesto pledges, except if you end up in coalition where you throw it all out the door, which is the strongest argument against transferable vote, by the way. But so you have a manifesto that you seek to maintain. When you're campaigning in a referendum, what you're actually talking about historically is a constitutional change, not a manifesto which you then seek to put bills in place to do it immediately. And so that goes to the heart of it, really, is that those on the Leave side were not one alternative government, and those on the Remain side, another alternative government. Although, actually, arguably, because David Cameron was the Prime Minister and was backing Remain, very obviously, you could argue that the Remain side was an alternative government. But Brexit certainly wasn't. It was a disparate group of people who thought that the UK's future would be brighter outside of the EU. And the time frames with which they held that view varied. As I said in my remarks here, some people thought, great, we save money, we stop free movement, it means I get a better job, it means I'm not competing any longer for, you know, my GP or my school or whatever it might be. People thought, great, it's going to happen straight away. And of course, they were wrong. There were also those who, and as I said, like myself, thought, actually, it's about democratic accountability. The EU won't reform. I spent some time explaining, in my view, reform was plan A. Plan B was, okay, the EU won't reform, so we need to leave it. In my view, it was about a direction of travel. But what it wasn't was a manifesto that was then able to be implemented by the Brexiteers. And my own history is very closely tied up with this because, as some of you might remember, I stood for the leadership. And the reason I stood down was because it was very clear to me that our Parliament at the time was a very, very strong Remain Parliament. Conservative MPs were in the strong majority Remainers, not Leavers, and made it very clear that if I was to win that leadership election, they would resign the whip, they would work against me, blah, blah, blah. Theresa May was the acceptable face, herself as a Remainer, albeit half-heartedly. She was the acceptable face of somebody who could be trusted to take us out of the EU. And nobody needs me to recap the history of the problems that ensued. So actually, none of it was foreseeable. I spent a lot of time in the Leave campaign saying no one has a crystal ball, no one can predict what will happen. But nevertheless, I hope that just answers, perhaps not to your satisfaction, but that is my opinion.
I'm never satisfied, don't worry.
No,
it's fine.
Good, excellent, nor am I.
I mean,